The staff are 5 lines which contain musical notes. The staff comprises 5 lines and 4 spaces. The lines and spaces represents the white keys on the keyboard. The clefs designate certain notes on the staff. There are 2 major clefs, the treble and the bass. The treble clef assigns the G, and the bass clef assigns the F note on the staff. The staff doesn't have enough room for all notes, especially the very high and very low ones. To show these notes, we use ledger lines. Ledger lines are short lines that hold notes. Here are a few examples. The grand staff is a combination of 2 staves put together, usually a treble clef and a bass clef. This combined clef is used for a variety of instruments, including piano, organ, marimba, harp, and more. Each stave is played by one person simultaneously. In many cases, the left hand plays the bass clef, while the right hand plays the treble clef. The note duration is the length of time the note is played. The longest note is the whole note. It's not surprising that the half note exists. Its length is half the duration of the whole note. The quarter note is fourth the duration of the whole note, and so on. The 8th note has 1 flag, the 16th note has 2 flags, and so on. The vertical line is the stem of the note, and the round part is the note head. A beam is a horizontal line used in musical notation to connect multiple notes. It helps to group the notes together for easier reading and indicates their rhythmic relationship. The majority of time, 2 or more 8 notes or shorter musical notes are connected with beams. As you can see, notes have exactly the same number of beams as flags. The direction of the stems is upward up to the middle line and downward above it. Triplets are groups of 3 notes that are played within the time normally taken by 2 notes of the same value. For example, half-note triplets sound 3 notes within the same duration of 2 half notes. Quarter note triplets sound 3 notes within the duration of 2 quarter notes. The rest duration is the length of time silence is maintained in the music. The longest rest is the whole rest, which lasts as long as a whole note. As expected, the half rest lasts half as long as a whole rest. The quarter rest lasts a quarter of duration of a whole rest, and so on. The 8th rest corresponds to an 8th note, the 16th rest to a 16th note, and so on. The 8th rest has 1 flag, the 16th rest has 2 flags, and so on. In music theory, rests are essential for creating rhythm and allowing space within the music, giving it shape and structure. Augmentation dots and tenuto ties alter the duration of a note. The dot increases the length of the note by half of the original note. For example, a quarter note with a dot is as long as 1 quarter note and an 8th note. Ties can merge multiple notes on the same pitch. Natural notes are the white keys on the piano. Between 2 adjacent notes could be a half and a whole step. Let's see the steps between the natural notes. As we can see, there are 2 half steps, E, F and B, C. All the other distances are whole steps. If we want to display the black keys on the staff, we have to use accidentals. Accidentals are signs that alter the pitches of the notes. There are 5 types of accidentals. The sharp raises the pitch with a half step. The flat lowers the pitch with a half step. The double sharp raises the pitch with a whole step. The double flat lowers the pitch with a whole step. The natural cancels out any accidentals. Enharmonic notes are pairs of notes that sound the same but are written differently. For example, the notes C sharp and D flat are enharmonic because they sound the same pitch but are spelled differently. The time signature is written at the beginning of the piece of music and look like a fraction. The top number tells you how many notes are in each measure, and the bottom number tells you the type of the note. For example, a 4/4 time signature means there are 4 quarter notes or their equivalent in one measure. Bar lines are vertical lines that divide the staff into measures. They help musicians keep track of where they are in the music. When an accidental is placed in front of a note, it affects all notes of the same pitch within the same measure. For example, if a sharp sign is placed in front of an F, all subsequent Fs in that measure are sharped unless a natural sign is used to cancel the sharp. At the end of the measure, the accidental is reset and the note returns to its original pitch in the next measure unless indicated otherwise. There are several scales in music theory, and I'd like to show you how easily you can understand them. Understanding major and minor scales and modes will make you a better composer. Let's start with the major scale. If we start with C and use only the white keys on the piano, we get a major scale. Now let's examine the intervals between the notes. We have 2 pairs of notes with half steps between them, EF and BC. There are whole steps between the other pairs of notes. If we start with the note A and use only the white keys on the piano, we get the natural minor scale. In the major scale, there is a half step between the last note and the first note. In the harmonic minor scale, we want to reproduce this half step between G and A, so we raise G with a sharp. In this case, a gap appeared between F and G sharp, which is a minor third. Therefore, we raise F with a sharp. This is the melodic minor scale. When played in descending order, the melodic minor scale uses the same notes as the natural minor scale. Remember that what matters most in a scale isn't where it starts, but the intervals between the notes. While we can begin a minor scale from a C, we need to use the corresponding accidentals. Pentatonic scales are scales with 5 notes. Let's start with a simple C major scale. If we start with C and use the first, the second, the third, the fifth and the sixth notes from the major scale, we get the major pentatonic scale. If we take the first, the third, the fourth, the fifth and the seventh notes from the minor scale, we can produce the minor pentatonic scale. Scales are mostly with 7 degrees, in other words 7 notes in Western music, and because of this there are 7 modes. Take a look at the C major scale. We can start a scale from all these 7 notes, which are the modes. Keep in mind when I say a scale starts from C or D or F, I mean it starts from that note in its natural form, but you always have an opportunity to transpose it to another starting point. However, in that case, you have to use the corresponding accidentals to keep the right intervals between the notes. Ionian mode has the same notes as the major scale because it starts with C. Therefore, Ionian mode is pretty much the same as the major scale. The Dorian mode is almost a minor scale. The difference between the minor scale and the Dorian mode is that Dorian has a whole step between the fifth and the sixth note. The Phrygian mode is similar to the minor scale, but the Phrygian mode has a half step between the first and the second notes. The Lydian mode is almost a major scale, but the Lydian mode has a whole step between the third and the fourth notes. The Mixolydian mode is similar to the major scale, but the Mixolydian has a whole step between the last and the first notes. The Aeolian mode is exactly the same as the natural minor scale because it starts with A, not only the word but also the scale. Let's take a look at the Locrian mode. This mode is different from the natural minor in 2 intervals. Your task is to figure out what intervals these are. The intervals measure the distance between 2 notes. To find the distance between 2 notes, we have to count the lines and spaces between the notes. When 2 notes share the same spot on the staff, it's called a prime. For instance, C to C or D to D are prime intervals. A second occurs when 2 notes are either a half step apart or a whole step apart. There are major seconds or minor seconds. The minor second is made up of 1 half step, the major second consists of 2 half steps. Similar to the second, the third can be minor or major. In simple terms, a minor third is 3 half steps and a major third is 4. The perfect fourth is made up of 5 half steps, in other words, 5 minor seconds. Major and minor fourth don't exist. The fourth has perfect, diminished, and augmented versions. The diminished interval is always a half step smaller than a perfect one, and an augmented one is always a half step larger than a perfect one. Like the fourth, the fifth doesn't have major or minor versions, only perfect, diminished, and augmented. The perfect fifth is made up of 7 half steps. The diminished fifth is enharmonically equivalent to an augmented fourth, and the augmented fifth represents 8 minor seconds. The sixth comes in major and minor versions. The minor sixth is enharmonically equivalent to the augmented fifth, and the major sixth represents 9 half steps. There are major and minor sevenths. The minor seventh consists of 10 half steps, while the major seventh is larger by a half step. The octave only has a perfect version and it's larger by a minor second than the major seventh. The notes in the octave are with the same names but in different pitches. It's important to note that there are diminished and augmented versions of the second, third, sixth, and the seventh intervals. Here, enharmonic equivalence occurs between the corresponding intervals. For example, a diminished seventh interval is an enharmonic equivalent of a major sixth. A chord is a combination of 3 or more notes. Triads consist of precisely 3 notes. The lowest note of a triad is called root, the middle is the third, and the highest note is the fifth. Basically, 4 types of triads exist: major, minor, diminished, and augmented. Chord names are made up of the chord type and the root note's name. For example, if a major chord starts with C, that's the C major chord. The major chord is built up of 2 intervals. The first is a major third and the second is a minor third. The minor chord also consists of a minor and a major third, but in this case, the minor third is the first interval. The diminished chord is made up of 2 minor thirds. The augmented chord consists of 2 major thirds. We don't need to start a chord with the root. When the lowest note of a chord is the root, that is the root position. If the lowest note is the third, that is the first inversion, and in the case of the lowest note is the fifth, that is the second inversion. To create the first inversion of a chord, simply move the root up by 1 octave. For the second inversion, move both the root and the third up by 1 octave. Suspended chords always have a second interval. The suspended second chord means the first interval in the chord is a major second, so it's almost a major triad, but the first interval is a major second instead of a major third. The suspended fourth chord is also almost a major triad, but the first interval in this chord is a fourth and the second is a major second. Take a look at the C major scale. As you see, we have 8 notes. We can split this scale into two parts. The first part shares the same intervals as the second part. If we play the notes from G to G, the fifth degree of the C major scale, we get these notes. This is almost a major scale, but because of the major second between F and G, it's actually a Mixolydian scale. To get a major scale, we need to raise F to F sharp. Instead of raising all the F notes with sharp throughout a music piece, we can use key signatures. Key signatures are sets of accidentals placed at the beginning of the music sheet. If we start a minor scale from E, we get the relative minor of G major. Relative minors of major scales share the same key signatures. A scale starting from the sixth degree of a major scale is always its relative minor. For example, A minor is the relative minor of C major because both scales have no sharps or flats. Starting a scale from the fifth degree of the G major scale, we get these notes. To create a major scale from these notes, we need to raise not only the F to F sharp, but also the C to C sharp, resulting in two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. By continuing this process, starting each new scale from the fifth degree of the previous major scale, we add another sharp each time. Here are the key signatures with sharps. If we start a scale from the fourth degree of the C major scale, we get an F Lydian scale, which requires lowering B to B flat to create an F major scale. Continuing this process, starting each new scale from the fourth degree of the previous major scale, we add another flat each time. Here are the key signatures with flats. As you can see, the notes are repeated on the keyboard octave by octave. Musicians need to identify not only the note name but also the octave. We use different systems for this purpose. First, I would like to introduce the middle C. Middle C is on the first lower ledger line in the treble clef and the first upper ledger line in the bass clef. Scientific pitch notation is a standard way to distinguish the octave of the notes. It's easy because it uses simple numbers for this. The lowest C on the piano is C1, and this number increases octave by octave, applying to every single note. The scientific pitch notation starts from C0. There is another method to identify the octave of a note called Helmholtz pitch notation. According to this system, the lowest C is the subcontra C, which is the C0 in scientific pitch notation. The one-line octave is named this way because we have to use one ledger line to write the one-line C. There is no such logic between the other line octaves like this.